Hey, SYDPers. So if you've been following the podcast, you may realize that it's been something like 10 months since we've released a new SYDP episode. And I've got to confess, there's a reason why we've had such a delay. And the reason we've had such a delay is that we as a podcast have had well over 100 episodes, over 100,000 downloads. We've had a lot of success with the podcast. And to be really, really honest and blunt with you guys, which you can always know that I'm going to be honest with my audience. The reason for that is that I just kind of had problems coming up with new content for you guys. I felt like we'd done so much in those first 100 episodes and provide so much information and education for the people wanting to go out there and start their dental practice and get everything up and running, that the only content that I was coming up with was content that I felt like wasn't as high a quality that you guys deserved. And I'm not going to put anything out there just for putting things out there. I'm not going to have guests on that I don't think are good guests, that I don't think are going to be amazing quality content for you guys, because I'm very protective of my audience. So I do have some episodes that I'm going to be releasing over the next few weeks. These are episodes that I gotta be, this is a piece of guilt I feel personally, is that some of these episodes I recorded something like 3 or 4 months ago. And I'm very sorry to the guests that I recorded them for so long and didn't release them. The reason I didn't release them is because I didn't want to just release one episode. I wanted to release a batch of them. And again, I was just having problems finding really good content. So rest assured, the next few episodes are going to be very high quality guests, and they're going to be very impactful for you and your practice. So I apologize that it's taking me so long to get back to you guys. I promise that the podcast is something that I hold very important to me, and I hear from you guys every single day that it's helped you in your fight to entrepreneurship. And so I'm really happy to be able to release these next few episodes. I'm very proud of them, and I think you'll enjoy them. So on to the episodes, and I appreciate all of you listeners sticking with me, and I'm going to try to get as many of these out as I can, and keep following the podcast. We're going to keep releasing content as time goes on. It just may not be every single week like it has been in the past. It might be every couple of weeks, it might be every month, but we're going to release really good content for you guys, and we're dedicated to giving you the best 45 minutes that in your ears that we can, because we know you have options for where to place those ears and what to listen to. So on to today's episode. Hello, ambitious dentist. Today I have with us one of my favorite guests that I've had on the podcast ever. She's fantastic. The reason that I like her so much is that she is a person that just gets out there, she gets things done, she does it at a high level, and she is an absolute pleasure to talk to and to follow along on some of her adventures, to be honest with you. Kiera Dent. Now, yes, her last name is Dent. She is not a dentist, but she works a lot with dental practices. We had her back on the show a year, 2 years ago at this point, somewhere in that range. It's been way too long. But if you're not familiar with her, she is a consultant. She's been in the dental industry for a really long time. She has a very compelling story as to how she got into dentistry. I urge you, if you've not listened to the episode, to go back and listen to that one too, after you're done with today's, of course. So if you're not familiar with Kiera, she is the founder and owner of Kiera's Dental Consulting. She is the founder and creator of the Dental Masters, which is a fantastic video library and resource. And she's also works hand in hand with another really good friend of the podcast, Dr. Mark Costas with the Dental Success Institute, which is I'm actually a part of the Dental Success Network as a faculty member. So Kiera, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Absolutely. It's so good to connect with you, and I appreciate the warm welcome. It's always fun to catch up and give some good nuggets to those who listen. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And let some of the listeners know a little bit ahead of time, but share with us what all you're doing now since you've been on the podcast last.
So yeah, last year we did hit all 50 states. So that was the big, in 1 year, went to all 50 states consulting. So Mark Costas teases all the time, guys, she really did it in 1 year. Wow. That was crazy. And I decided not to do that this year. But so we're still consulting. We have about 140 clients between my clients and the DSI clients. And we've ramped that up a ton. We've restructured a lot of how we're consulting, and just it's been fun to watch our clients just grow. I mean, we've had some super fun success stories, like 220% growth within a year. Another client just like doubled his production in one visit that we were with. So it's been fun to kind of just see, like, when I first started the consulting company, I thought I was playing house and I didn't really know if I knew what I was doing. Like, don't tell any of the first people, but like I truly just decided to just jump in and try it. So it's been really fun this last year to kind of evolve the consulting company. And then that actually took us towards Dental Masters, the formal front office training company that we have, where we realized, Tiffany and I, she consults with me and Mark, we all started talking about how the front office really didn't have a lot of training or experience. And that, Jonathan, was one of the podcasts that I went on with you last year about office managers and how hard it is to find training for office managers. And so Dental Masters we have a huge video bank library. We have online courses for office managers, treatment coordinators, schedulers, billers. We have one-on-one coaching for your front office and then in office. And we also just had our first live event for it. So that's kind of been what we've been working on. And honestly, it's just fun. When you own your own business, it's super, super, super stressful, but also you get to like play house. You get to create and imagine and then actually see those visions come to play. So it's been really fun this past year.
And you're absolutely right. And, we were talking before the podcast started about new practice ownership and people coming into ownership for the first time. And, just kind of touching on the point of office managers or, well, let me ask you this. How do you define what an office manager is? What is an office manager versus what is an administrative person? Because I feel like that those two words are thrown around so much in this industry without very much clear distinction. I want to hear your take on that, lingering topic, inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tricky because, so I go into offices and I'll see like office managers I think a true office manager is somebody who can take the dentist vision, implement it into the team, run the team, have the KPIs hitting. So the dentist really, you can't take your eye off the target as a dentist. You still need to make sure you oversee your whole practice. But the reality is a true office manager is one who can literally have that office run seamlessly without the doctor or anybody else, based on systems, not on that person. Whereas an office administrator is one who just kind of like does the tasks as they come to them, but doesn't step into that leadership overseeing like right hand with the dentist. And a lot of dentists like to maintain that. They like to actually be the office manager instead of letting go of some of those responsibilities. And I believe that's just due to not having the correct systems and tracking in place. And so that's what I would say is a true office manager as opposed to an office administrator.
Very good definitions. And I hope everyone that's out there is listening to those definitions, because that will teach you a lot about who you have sitting there in your office with you. So another thing that we find that new practice owners, and as well as even established owners, have a lot of problems with is holding their office managers accountable. One of the things that we talk a lot about on the Start Your Dental Practice podcast, as well as I speak around the country and on podcasts about our KPIs and the things like that. And a lot of the times you can use KPIs to help hold your office managers accountable. It's kind of like a scorecard, if you will, right? So
definitely.
What, how do you start that conversation with an office manager or with a dentist when you're trying to get them to talk to the office manager, or turning an administrative person into an office manager or whatever it may be? How do you start, bringing those two together for that doctor owner and that team? How do you approach that situation?
Fantastic you brought this up, because accountability is probably the number one thing I get asked how to do. And the reason people hire me over and over and over again is because they're looking for accountability. But you're completely 100% right that the KPI is what holds the practice accountable. So the way I usually describe it is I say, like when we go to the doctor's office, what's the first thing they do to us? Well, they take our vitals, they take our blood pressure, they take our temperature, they take our heart rate. And I ask why they take those vitals. And it's, well, because those are the key indicators to let us know how our body is. If our blood pressure is sky high, well, clearly we need to do something to fix that, because we're going to, there can be some serious repercussions with it. And I correlate that those vitals of our bodies when we go see our doctor, our primary care physician, is the exact same equivalent of KPIs for a practice. Those KPIs are the vitals, and those will literally tell you where we're doing well in our practice, where our practice is hurting. And then it allows us to streamline and make our lives more simple by focusing on the areas that we really are struggling in. And that's typically, when I say it that way, like I'll repeat, if this is to make our lives easier and to focus on what we really need to focus on. When office managers hear that, you instantly just gave them a roadmap of how they can accomplish everything. And I appreciate you, John, because your podcast last year actually resulted in a client that I've been coaching for the last year of an office manager office just over the phone. I've never actually met these amazing people in person, but we've worked through this whole last year of really creating those office managers and making decisions based on KPIs and KPIs only, because you can't get everything done in a day. And so we've switched the mindset of this entire office, doctor, office manager, team, the whole kit and caboodle, to really focus on those KPIs. So they're actually able to do less, but create more by focusing on those KPIs. So I think when people hear that and you start to see, because the reality is, why on earth are we focusing on our new patient experience? If our new patient numbers are sky high, we're getting fantastic reviews, there's no reason other than to maintain that. But if we're not doing well in our production and our case acceptance, that's the KPI that we should be focusing on instead. And we're spending our efforts and our time on the things that really will move the needle forward by focusing on those KPIs or vitals of a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really fantastic way of putting it. So, on the subject of KPIs, whenever you're, being introduced to a practice, what are some of the KPIs that you start with? I would have to assume some of that depends on where the practice is. So let's go from the perspective of a practice that has been maybe stagnant for a while. Talk to me about the KPIs from that perspective of a client.
So believe it or not, I actually track similar KPIs for all practices, because I believe the bulk of KPIs, no matter if you're that practice that wants to grow, we're going to focus a little more heavily on the growth versus the startup practice. Most people want to grow in their practice. I've only had 2 clients who said, I don't want to grow, I just want to maintain. That's super easy. We can do that. But the bulk of people want the same thing. So my favorite KPIs, and people who know me that I've consulted with, I actually make a silly little, take you back to elementary school, a whiteboard of these KPIs that your office is actively engaged in a part of every single day, because I like KPIs not just to be a number on an Excel spreadsheet, but to become a real tangible thing that people can see that they can impact as an entire team. So favorite KPIs that I work heavily on are production and collection, always tracking those, making sure we're setting your numbers appropriate for you as a doctor, but also for the amount of operatories, things like that. So production and collections, aiming for 98% collections every single month, time over time. Overhead, Mark and I aim for our clients to be between 50 to 65% overhead. So I'm always tracking our overhead. I track new patients. I track Google and Yelp reviews. I'm tracking case acceptance, reappointment percentages, attrition. And I also look at case acceptance, and then I'm constantly looking at our marketing ROI, what's going on with marketing if we have that as part of the practice. Now, like you said, those are just as a set standard. I always have those. There are plenty more, but as a set standard, if you could track those month over month and kind of watch to see your trends, see which months are your hard months, see which months are your easy months, and see how you're actually doing, and then which one of those KPIs you're sitting the lowest in, that's the one that we focus on. And I like to focus on 2 or 3 KPIs per month that we really hone in to work on. You can work on all of them. Some of them will tie into each other, but those are the main ones. And then if you're an office working on growth, I'd be tracking your case acceptance, your new patients, and your production. Those would be my 3. Reviews would definitely help as well if you're kind of low on that, because that will feed in more new patients for you. But those are my main ones, because if you're tracking that every single day and we're pushing your numbers, I also like to tell offices we're in growth mode always. So once we hit our production of 80, 90, 100, 150, 250, we will constantly be pushing that production number up. And it's not to take the goal out of reach, but if you're not pushing those KPIs on your team, you're not growing. So that would be, in a nutshell, my favorite KPIs and how to track them, and also the 3 top ones for growth.
Very cool. And how do you get the staff to pay attention to these things?
Well, I was in a coaching call today, and the doctor was coming in and just super, he was hounding his team about, we've got to hit the numbers and we've got to have our hygiene. Oh, hygiene's another great one, producing 3.3 times their pay. But we've got to do these and we've got to hit these numbers. And that method does not work because teams, being on the team side, myself working in an office, when my doctor came to me and said, Kiera, we need to hit these goals and we need to hit production and we need to hit production. Now being on the ownership of dental practices, I completely understand why there's that like severity and urgency in getting those numbers up because you're freaking out that you can't pay off your credit cards or whatever it is. Like, I totally can see both sides of the coin. But from a team member's perspective, when you're constantly hounding numbers, they feel you don't care about patients. And when your team feels like you don't care about patients, they lose confidence in you as a dentist. And so they may or may not hit those KPIs you're searching for, but it's more of like an iron fist, like chasing after them. It's the fear tactic as opposed to the empowering tactic. So my model is very much on the empowering side where, like I said, I take it back to kindergarten, first grade, and I draw pictures on whiteboards and I have thermometers that will track the production. And what I do is I literally have the whole team in morning huddle sit around a whiteboard. And like, I'm not kidding. When I say I make it super fun and cheesy, it's like taking them back to elementary school where the thermometer like creeps up all month long and hopefully we get the pizza party at the top of it. That kind of mentality because, and it's funny, I actually saw this in Home Depot when I was there. They had a thermometer to hit goals and I was like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like big corporations do this too. Because if it's fun, your team does engage. So every morning I have my team track on the whiteboard, their production, their collections, the days left in the month, the new patient total out of our goal, how many reviews, what our case acceptance was from the day before, what our reappointment percentage was from the day before, what our attrition rate is. And literally, and I have that whiteboard sit in the break room. So when people go and eat lunch, they're looking at that because that hones in the vision of the whole team. And as you have them like color it in and change the numbers every single day, it becomes an actively engaging thing. So even without you hounding them every single day, they naturally see that thermometers are not where they should be. They naturally, just as human nature, we don't like to lose. Like most people in life don't like to lose or be behind. And so your team will naturally just have that mind shift because they see that they're behind schedule with having those KPIs there. So that's how I tend to do it on a very general basic. I mean, we can get into more specifics per office that we can change, but overall, I think it becomes a really fun way for your whole team to engage. And then they get crazy and they'll draw Christmas trees in December for the thermometers and hearts and Valentine's Day. Like they go crazy and they make it really fun and personal. That's how I get the whole team to engage.
Yeah, I've seen that too. The fear works in the short run, but ultimately, typically fear turns into resentment if you're using fear as a leadership tactic. And eventually that will turn into resentment either now or later. And I love the fact that you're talking about having the numbers be in front of them to say, pass or fail, because, we see that too. I mean, I even see that in my teammates and people that are employees in my company of saying, hey, here's where we need to be on pace to get all of our tax returns completed by the end of tax season. And here's where we are today. And you'll just see the next week, all of a sudden we're back on pace because they knew they had to focus on that number, right? There was a doctor a long time ago that said to me, I can't get this person to care about these numbers. I can't get them to care about it. To me, the question was either, one, what are we doing? Why are we not engaging this person properly? Or two, is this the right person to be trying to engage with?
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
Right. Well, I was just saying that, that to me as a business owner, especially for these new practice owners as well, that's actually the easy way to get through the business piece of it is to be able to figure out, oh, they don't do their job well, or they're not caring about doing their job well, or they don't want to be a part of the team, or whatever it may be as far as culturally. I guess what, guys, that is your conclusion of all the different factors that have come up, that the conclusion is that maybe that's the person that needs to be replaced. Maybe that's the problem. That to me is actually that makes this whole process easier rather than harder.
Definitely. Because I mean, also to tie into that, when you talk about, I can't get this team member to engage, a lot of times people think that money or bonuses are what motivates everybody. But truly knowing what motivates your team members, some people just like words of affirmation. Like you writing them a card would mean way more to them than you giving them $100 bonus. Other people, they want money. Other people want this. So figuring out what incentivizes each team member specifically and then playing to their own, kind of like the love languages. Like if I'm constantly giving you gifts, but all you want from me are words of affirmation, I'm never going to get you to engage. Like, it's never going to work because I'm not speaking to you personally. But then after that, if you figure that out, and I mean, there's a book called Traction that Mark and I really like, and they talk about if those team members are not the correct team member for your team, like they're not the culture fit, they're not capable of doing the things you want to do, that's when you have that hard decision of, and it shouldn't even be a hard decision, because the reality is, if they're not helping grow your practice, I tell people it's like rowing on a ship. We're all rowing towards, say Africa, or I don't care where you're going, but our vessel is rowing towards Africa. If you want to go towards China or Antarctica, wherever you want to go, there are other boats that are going that direction. So get on that one, because we are all rowing in the same direction. And if you're not rowing with us, you're actually rowing against us. And at that point, they need to get off your boat and get on a boat that actually is taking them to their dream job as well. And that's where, when you think about it, is this person truly on our team going towards their dream job with us? Awesome. We know they're the right person. But if not, then we're holding them back from going to their dream job. And when you have that mindset, that makes having that quote unquote uncomfortable conversation actually a lot easier, because it creates that open space for you and them to both be going the same direction or splitting ways, so you can both be happier.
Completely agree. So another thing that we talked about before the call started was you gave me a number. I love numbers. And that number was how many phone calls a practice can get from potential new patients. And I was, to be honest with you, when you said it, I was like, wow, is that right? And it makes total sense when I start doing the math in my head. It's just something that I've never quantitatively sat down and thought about. So share with our listeners like what it is that you've been doing some studying on, what you've been researching in terms of patients actually calling the practice. Because if we're going to talk about growth, we have to talk about the new patients. And if we're talking about new patients, unless you're in a very, very techie place in the world, plus you're very lucky, unless you're in a very techie place in the world and you're in an area that's a bit of an outlier in the terms of how most patients schedule their appointments, they're going to be using the phone as that method of communicating between awareness and getting on the schedule. So share with us what you've been doing research as far as this, and if you would, to share some of your insights to this piece of the practice puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love numbers as well. I feel like numbers never lie, which is why I love KPIs, because then your team can't hide behind them. It's like, here's the proof. Let's find the solution. The saying that you have to use now, since you've heard me, is that numbers are your friends because you can count on them. I love it. It's absolutely right. Yes, so numbers are our friends because we can count on them. So let's count these ones.
Welcome to the Dad Joke Podcast, everybody.
Seriously, welcome, guys. Welcome. I'll bust out my jokes next. Tiffany and I think we're so funny sometimes, and we're like, why did the mushroom laugh? Oh, because he's a fun guy. Like, just dumb things. So, okay. So back to phone calls. I have been really searching phone calls and scheduling, because I think that is an area that's really low-hanging fruit in most practices that we gloss over because it's not sexy, it's not fun. That number is not one that we really want to dive in. We want to talk about production and like hitting our high numbers. Like, that's way more fun. The bottom line is, if we focus on this super low-hanging fruit, your practice can skyrocket just by doing this. So 85% of all business coming to a practice, like you were saying, Jonathan, is based on the phone. And of all those phone calls that come in that are new patients, the number was 80% of them will not call back if they go to voicemail. So that number was like astonishing to me. And then of those that go to voicemail, like that, they won't call back. But of those, only 25% actually leave a voicemail. So like 80% of them won't even call back, and then only 25% actually are leaving voicemails. So like, your phone call is paramount, because 85% of your business is still coming from that phone call. And if they get to the voicemail or we don't answer, they're put on hold, odds of them calling back or leaving a voicemail is super, super low. And they've estimated that every new patient who comes to your practice is $15,000 over the course of their lifetime, is what we've kind of calculated out and deduced down. with exams and over the amount of time that they're in a practice. So every single new patient call, I mean, that 15 grand just like makes my stomach drop thinking of how many phone calls we missed. And I actually did a random sampling on poor offices. I think I called about 10 offices in one day. I would just find random offices and call and pretend to be a new patient to see what was going on in dental offices. And I like scoped random areas. I went clear across the US. I just wanted to get a nice sample size of it. And the reality was, people miss those phone calls because they dive right into things that are not important. They dive into things that are like insurance based, or they put up a million barriers instead of saying yes. My average phone call time was 8 to 10 minutes, which, in case you're wondering, is a very long time being the person calling in. I just want to get my teeth cleaned, and it took me 10 minutes to just get that done. Like, it was an insane amount of time. And it wasn't even like people were being efficient with my time. It was, I would say, I want to make, like, I'm a new patient. Are you accepting new patients? And it was always yes. And then this awkward pause. They didn't seem excited that I was calling. It was just like all these barriers. And the bulk of them I would never have scheduled unless I really needed my teeth cleaned or something like that. I had an emergency. I pretended to have a toothache on one of them, and I was booked out 2 months before I could come in for it. Like, and doctors, I hope you're not sitting there like, oh, my office would never do that, because I called some of my very best offices that I thought would ace these phone calls, and theirs were the ones that were putting me 2 months out on an emergency. So just know it was not like the terrible offices I was calling. I was calling like the uppity, I was calling the, you name it, whatever type of practice. I did a solid sampling of offices just to see. And I think when you think about every new patient averages $15,000 per new patient over their lifetime, don't you think that maybe mastering those phone calls and those schedules could give you those sexy numbers of higher production and collections, which will lower your overhead just by doing that one thing of getting that phone call saved?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so easy for us in today's like tech world to try and think of like a way to map out like what a successful practice can do. And I find that sometimes it's just the simplest things. Like sometimes it is really not that complicated. And the phone is just one of those that before I got into this industry, I would have said, we have all these doctors that are some of the brightest minds in the world, and there's no way that's an issue. I couldn't believe how often I got voicemails for the practice's main number. I was just flabbergasted. And here's a guy that's trying to get to talk to the doctor and has a business reason for doing so. And I don't even want to leave a voicemail. Like, I don't even, this is my client that I'm talking to. I don't want to leave a voicemail because if I do that, they're never going to call me back. Or it's not going to be, they're going to
Exactly.
and I don't know when they're going to listen to it. Like, it's probably going to be at the end of the day and it's not going to make any difference. I'm supposed to be talking to this person in 2 minutes ago at this point. So I was dumbfounded by this. I mean, it's just this overwhelming number of dental practices. And then, you add to that and you get, sometimes you'll get a phone whenever someone answers the phone, they'll be incredibly suspicious. It seems like, almost like, who is this? And why are you calling us? And things like that. Man, they're,
it's because you're super suspicious.
I know.
That's why you gotta,
Well, honestly, maybe it's because some of them they were maybe in different states or maybe more northern states than Arkansas, and maybe my southern accent was coming out a little bit, and they're like, "Well, who is this guy calling us from Arkansas?
Who is this?"
Yeah, like really. But either way, I mean, it's still it seems like one of those things that it just makes so much sense that it is an area that can literally it can be a we're talking about pass fails on numbers. It can be a pass fail on just growth. Like, if this is bad, you will not grow type situation.
Totally.
I'm sure that there's some sample of the doctors that are listening right now that are saying, my person's great. At the same time, there's people that say my person's probably not too great. So the ones that already are thinking like they're not too great, go out and find help because it's going to make a difference. But to the people that do think their person is doing great already, what is a way for you to be able to give them some information of how to define, how to figure out and to be a detective to figure out if this person is doing a good job or not? Like what are the key components to a phone call, someone answering the phone in a practice and then converting that person into a new patient? Like how do you judge someone on that? Because I'm sure it's somewhat subjective in certain ways and objective in others.
Yeah. I think it's we talk about like edification, empathy, and energy. Those are Mark's 3 E's that we've all kind of adapted and grown together. Like when there's research that shows that on a conversation or on that phone call, people only actually hear 7% of what you say. So of the total 100%, only 7% are actually the words. The rest of it is feelings and body language and things like that. So like even on a podcast, people say like, Kiera, like when I talk to you on the phone, you sound exactly the same as you do on a podcast. Well, yeah, I bring my all of all. I bring a lot of energy on a podcast because I want to fire these doctors up. I want to fire people up who are listening because you feel something from me. Whether you heard my words or not, I want you to feel amazing when you get off this podcast. I want you to feel like, yeah, like I'm ready to go. Like I just got pumped up in the locker room. Like, let's go win this game. That's the same type of thing on phone calls. Like, what is your front office member's energy? What do they edify the practice? Do they talk about how great this is and how amazing it is that that patient chose your practice and that they made the best choice? And then also, do they show empathy if there's, in whatever realm? Those are 3 big components as you listen in. We also built a scorecard for phone calls of, did they dive right into insurance questions? Did they make a personal connection? Do they get the patient scheduled? I always say emergency should be scheduled within 24 to 48 hours, always, no exceptions. If it's a new patient calling for a cleaning, are they scheduled? I aim for 24 hours, at the most a week out, because otherwise they're going to the next office. Those are big areas. Like, do they smile? Are they showing teeth when they answer the phone? Those are all areas. And people say like, well, is it really that big of a deal? Absolutely. That is a big deal because you are competing with every other dentist online. Most patients go online to see you as your practice. So the fact that they actually called your office means you won on some level. They liked your reviews. You were in network with their insurance. There was something that enticed that patient to call your practice. Now you have to win them from there. Like they've already chosen you. Your job is just to make their life easy breezy and to get them in the schedule so they feel like $1 million. Like that's literally all that schedule has to do. But yeah, people usually pay that person the least amount of money. And they're just like, well, it's fine. They can, if they catch the call or they don't catch the call, or I get the excuse of, well, Kiera, we're just so busy, we can't answer the phone. And I'm like, so you're too busy to accept 15 grand? Like, totally cool. I wish I had your life. Like, I want to be able to have a life where 15 grand does not matter to me. Because to me, I feel like if I did that just with a phone call, I think we'd be in good shape. So those are a few items that I score calls on. And like, guys, this is a really easy way to do it to your practice. Is have one of your friends call your office. Just call, pretend to be a new patient. And like, if you want, I'm happy. People can email me. I'll send you our scorecard for phone calls to see how your office is doing based on what I thought. I had 10 objectives that I felt would make the perfect phone call. So if you want that, by all means, I'm happy to give it to you. But have your friends call. You can go on zoom.com and it's free and they can actually record the call. That's literally how I did it. And you just put your phone on speakerphone and you record the other person on the other line and you can play it back, or you can use like Callforce. They have a recording service. But scoring those phone calls, then it no longer is the subjective. It's objective. So you and your scheduler could both score a few sample phone calls to see, are we actually converting? How are we doing? And then use your analytics. Like track to see how many new patient phone calls come through. Google Analytics, you have Callforce that can track it for you of new patient calls that were missed. But track that, because I think if you did just a little bit of math since we're on this podcast, calculating how many of those new patient phone calls came through that weren't converted, and do the math of how valuable those calls really are to your practice.
Love it. So how often do you recommend people actually do this auditing of the phone calls?
So I personally like to do at least once a month because I like to creep on my team. Like I like to make them never know when I'm calling. I used to I worked remotely for a few days a week, and I would always creep on my office. As ridiculous as that sounds, because I'd call in and pretend to be a patient, or I'd call in to see if they'd pick up the phone on me, or like you, or it'd go to voicemail. And I would do that because my team then, because they knew I was checking in on them, or somebody, it can be a spouse, like you can block your phone numbers for most dental practices, or have your friends call in and just see, did they get voicemailed? What was the energy, empathy, and edification of that person? But I personally like to do it once a month. Otherwise, it never happens. And so I like my cadences of KPIs and these follow-ups to be on a monthly basis. So I just know on the 5th of every single month, we're going to review phone calls. And at some point during that time, I will have some mystery person, whether it's myself or someone else, call in and record a call so I can go over it with my scheduler once a month in my monthly assessment with that team member.
I love it. Awesome. You'd also mentioned to me that you had a trick. I don't know if a trick is the right word. Maybe you had a strategy. I don't have a great way to ask this without just asking it directly.
Just ask. It's fine.
You said that you had a way for practices to add $70,000 in 3 days to the practice's books. And I tried to think of a clever way of asking that, and said, you know what? I'm just going to put her on the spot. I'm going to have her answer that just as cold as possible, because I want to hear what your strategy is behind doing that.
Yeah, and so it's super hard. Only like one person in the entire world can ever do it. I'm just kidding. No, it's the easiest thing. You just have to do it. Otherwise,
and with a low payment of $1,000 for 3 payments for 3 months, then you'll be able to figure out what it is if you go to buythisthingrightnow.com.
Exactly. No, you have to sign up with Jonathan and his firm. Otherwise, I cannot share the secrets. No, everything I do is really, really, really easy. It's just, like I said, it's not the glamorous, it's not the sexy things that everybody wants to do. It's truly just, it's putting those basic foundational pieces into play. So I went into an office and I worked heavily on case acceptance and tracking their numbers. So it was morning huddle, tracking their numbers, route slips, and case acceptance. 4 items that I implemented. Very, very, very easy. The first morning huddle, people think I'm crazy. I was just in the office this past week. They stopped using these route slips, and I said, that's fine. You can stop doing route slips, but what about the 7 patients you missed today that all had family members needing to be scheduled or had pending treatment? Like, why did we not schedule those? And as soon as I said that, we calculated the total, and it was about $7,000 that this office let walk out the door just because they weren't utilizing route slips and actually scheduling.
But
so right there, that $7,000 that I was able to catch in a practice on Friday and put that on there. Yeah. So I use route slips in the morning huddle. We're proactive on it. We are, I make everybody pre-prep their charts, and they think, Kiera, you're crazy. You make them fill out this dumb piece of paper. And yeah, it's not super glamorous or sexy, like I said, but it works. And it's just a checklist that you go through and you look for every single person coming into the practice. Are they scheduled for their cleaning? Do they have any pending treatment that could be done same day? And do they have any family members that need to be scheduled, obviously being HIPAA compliant? Of that information, we then are proactive in our approach when that patient comes in. That patient comes in, I make sure that they're scheduled for their cleaning. I make sure all family members are scheduled for their cleanings. And I make sure if they're coming in for one filling, could I do anything else in that same quadrant or in their mouth that same visit? Because they're taking time off work. Why not just maximize them that day? So that's step 1. It's super easy and it's a proactive approach. People tell me, but Kiera, as soon as they get in the chair, we look for this. We're already doing this. And I say, you're 100% correct. But reality also is that if I'm looking while they're in the chair, I've lost the opportunity in case my schedule falls apart to bring that patient in sooner and do more treatment on them. I've lost the opportunity to pull them into hygiene because I didn't notice they needed a cleaning until they were already in the chair, but my appointment earlier in the day fell apart and I could have brought them into there. We've lost the opportunity because we're reactive, not proactive. So that's and then the last piece of it is when the doctors go in and do exams, I call it the NDTR. It's North Dakota Totally Rocks, so it's an easy way to remember it. But doctors just recap at the end of your appointment and be very directed in your appointment, in your treatment plan. So tell the patient the next visit, that's your N for North Dakota. The D stands for date range and the T stands for time needed. R stands for recare. So doctors, at the end of your visit, you always say, okay, Kiera, I want to get you back. I'm going to start on the upper right. I want to see you back in about 2 weeks and I need an hour and a half for that. That date range, I don't care what you choose to put in there. You just let your patient know a date that they can connect to. If you say soon or as soon as possible, or, whatever else you choose to say because you're scared of rejection, which is fine. Most doctors do that. It's nothing personal, but just most people don't like to put that on their patients. Yes, you're right. Their tooth probably isn't going to break in the next 2 weeks, but why are we waiting? And why not just give them a directive that makes their life simple? If you give them that, and then I tell my teams to write that NDTR on the route slip, you take it up to the front office and say, okay, Sally, Kiera needs to come back in for the upper right fillings. We need you back in 2 weeks for about an hour, or whatever our doctor said. That exact verbiage will close cases, and that's how we were able to put 70,000 on the books in 3 days. And we're talking, this practice is already producing 70,000. So I did what they normally produce in 1 month, 70,000. We did it in 3 days. We added an additional 70,000 to their books with these simple processes. That's it. Nothing crazy. I didn't go wild. We weren't doing implants. Nothing crazy. It was literally that exact sauce right there is what we did.
To continue on this path of, we've talked about phone calls, we've talked about routing slips, we've talked about accountability, KPIs. We've talked a lot about in the last 40 minutes. What else have you been really focusing on, or been educating practice owners about, that has added a lot of impact and actually been a catalyst for change in dental practices recently?
Of the education of dental practice, like the dentist?
Yeah, exactly. What is it that you're finding dentists are needing more of now?
Dentists, there's a few things. One is like how to be confident in their presenting of treatment. It's something I work on heavily, because doctors, a lot of times they come out of school, they're super comprehensive, and then they tend to scale back to where a patient will say yes, and they tend to stay there. When the reality is patients tend to say yes if you diagnose confidently. And I coach on this a lot. Like, I'll stand outside of the operatories and listen to how they present, or they go the opposite and they're like way too in the weeds of telling us all the technical terms, which is great. It's super good. Like, there's a fine line of educating and like overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so you got to walk that fine line, because I found that if you can do that, where it's just make it really simple for your patient to say yes. Look for those opportunities for your patient to be able to say yes. And use e-racks to get those fillings done. They know, and you've just told them exactly what to come back for. But don't be afraid to diagnose what they need. If they need crowns, like, people are like, well, I can't overwhelm them. Overwhelm is a state of mind, and you're assuming that that's overwhelming for that patient. Go in and diagnose and let the patient then decide what to do. Treatment coordinators are really good. I don't say like go over the top crazy, but we used to present, and we had close cases when we would present a lot of treatment. It's just because it's a matter of, are you confident in that treatment? If you're not confident in it, your patient will not feel confident. So that's something that I feel, as a doctor, if you can take that, like, and if you're super shy and you don't want to do that, take my challenge of just diagnosing one more thing than you normally would do. One more thing. So if you would normally just do like an MOD, even though it really needs to be a crown, treatment plan 1 crown more than you would normally do. If you normally would just do an MO, but it really needs to be an MOD, diagnose that it's an MOD. Like, don't be afraid, just do one more thing. So you become more confident. You're just afraid because at some point you were rejected. At some point somebody said no, and you have taken that to be the norm as opposed to the exception. So see where it was at one point. I don't care where it was, but just accept and know that that's what's happened, and that's why you tend not to be as confident in your treatment planning. And then go for it. Like, don't be afraid. Give them that directive of next visit, date range, time, and see what happens. And I know you'll see results if you're confident in it and your team's on board with you, because I've taken an office from 50% case acceptance to 100% case acceptance in 1 day doing this. So I know it works, and that's something that I feel doctors like. That's a really powerful thing. There's 100 other things that I could tell you, like how to help your office manager, or how to get the phone skills, or how to get your operations manual done in 3 months, or like so many other things. But really, if I'm giving a doctor like a one-on-one, this is what I want to leave you with, that's what it would be. Be confident in your treatment planning, and don't be afraid to actually diagnose what that patient needs. Give them the directive and see what happens. You'll see a lot of amazing results.
I love it. So, Kiera, you've been a wealth of knowledge today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Guys and gals that are listening, please reach out to Kiera and say thank you for giving us such valuable information today. As I alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, I knew that this would be a great episode just because I'm such a big fan of Kiera's. And I believe that she's given us a ton of really valuable advice today. So, Kiera, for people that are wanting to reach out, what's a way for people to get in contact with you? What's a way for people to find out more about what it is that you've got going on and to learn more about you and how you help practices?
Absolutely. Thank you. If you're interested in consulting in office, head on over to kierasdentalconsulting.com. You can also send me an email there. Kiera is just a really funky word to spell. So Kieras, Kiera's Dental Consulting. Or if you're interested in like the front office, you need help with training, operations manual, head on over to thedentalmasters.com. And you can also send us an email to thedentalmasters@gmail.com. So either one of them will get to us. We're always happy to help either way. And I really appreciate you letting me on the podcast, sharing information. I hope that people really dive in and just grab one thing. I know we had so many things in this podcast. It was fun. I love doing smorgasbord podcasts where we get to share so many great gems, but just take one of these items and implement it and see the changes, because sometimes the worst thing you could do is have inaction. The best thing you could do is just take action in one item and really see the growth of it. So Jonathan, as always, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. I really love what you do and the people that you serve, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.
Thank you, Kiera. It was my pleasure, and I had a ton of fun doing it. So, guys, we'll see you next time. Tune in the next time to start your dental practice, and we'll see you later.
So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice.